Okay.
Cool. So welcome everyone to IMR, now that I've managed to make it work. And today I'll just leave the floor to Ryan and Simon, and because my computer is clearly not working very well, then I might accidentally drop off at some point, and if that's the case, then I'm sure you guys can manage. Cool. All yours.
Okay. Well, since I'm doing the first part of the presentation, I guess I'll start. So my name is Ryan, and I'm a MAPS team volunteer. Full-time, I work at IMAP. We've been wanting to do a session on Hexel and the humanitarian data exchange and kind of the data ecosystem around humanitarian aid, but we thought it would be good to combine it into a larger session around open data in general. So I just have a few intro slides about open data and what it is and what are the pros and cons. And then Simon has a few things on the humanitarian exchange language, humanitarian data exchange perhaps, and some more concrete things that are more specific to us. And then we may have a couple of exercises, I think Simon has, and then we'll have discussion over open data and interoperability in our field. So I am going to figure out how to share my screen on Zoom because it's been 6 months of this and I apparently, there we go. I still haven't done it. Okay. Can everyone still see it, right? I want to make sure because I'm only sharing. Awesome. Okay. So I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of open data. So I'll try and give a little bit more info if you don't know exactly what it is. But open data, when we talk about it today, is actually a really new concept. Open data in the public sector didn't really start until 2009, 2010. I think the UK government didn't create an open data policy until 2010. So while some pieces of open data on the internet have a longer history, whenever anyone within the Red Cross or aid or development speaks about open data, it's actually only within the last decade that this topic has been developing. But it's growing quite quickly. It's generally data that can be freely accessed and accessible to anyone. There shouldn't be any discrimination whatsoever on who can find it, who can use it, and who can share it. It should be redistributed freely as much as you want. There should not be any licensing attached to it unless it's an open data license. At most, with that license, you would have to attribute and reference where you got the data. That's generally the highest restriction that should be attached to open data. It has quite a public sector and civics history around government transparency. So this idea of open data is actually a very public sector and a very government and civic society centered history. And even though it's kind of approaching, there are private sector initiatives that are similar, much of this is around public sector data. It's not the same as big data, but there are overlaps, especially around interoperability and how the data interact with each other. The pros are that it's free. So it's open data is always free for anyone to use. It's normally easily accessible. It's part of a standard that if something is open data, then it should be easy to find, easy to download, easy to use, easy to share. There's a really strong community and ecosystem around open data. So if this is something that you use or have issues with, it's quite easy to get support if you're having issues or trying to figure out the best way to use open data. There aren't too many cons. The negatives are, as far as selection, you don't always get to choose the data that you want since you're not the one collecting it. So you have to be quite clear on what your objectives are and what data you're trying to use and find the best data set for that use. And interoperability, which I'll discuss after this, it can be quite difficult to align different data sources to other data sources depending on your objectives. So data interoperability is generally the ability of different systems to communicate to each other. So when you get into the wider definition about complex systems and as technology grows, it's the ability of all these systems to communicate with each other properly. In the context of us, I'm sure most people within the Red Cross or within your careers have had an issue where another person or department or organization does something very similar to you and collects the same data, and yet you're not able to use it. Whether that's because the questions they asked were different, the data collected is slightly different, but pretty much it's close, but not perfect enough for you to use it. So interoperability is the ability to make sure that data that I collect, data that you collect, data that someone else collects, data that someone in government collects, are all able to be used together for analysis. Um, but there's lots of different layers to what interoperability is. There's the technology layer, data and format layer is a large one, especially for us in the maps team who collect geospatial data or use geospatial data. If I'm using a system that uses a .geojson file and there's a different system that's in a different file from ArcGIS or QGIS, we can't use necessarily an API to automatically align that data. There are ways around that, but in the spirit of open data, it should be in a format or data structure that is as easy as possible to use. The human layer, which can range from competency to errors to all sorts of things, as well as institutional and organizational layers. So how does the Red Cross create its data? How does the British Red Cross use data versus IFRC? How does the Red Cross movement use data versus the UN, et cetera? We have our own institutional culture around what data is, especially the Red Cross, around data privacy and what types of data we're willing to share. So kind of in order to maintain interoperability, there's different things that we can use. You can make sure that you use quality data. Um, Quality data in general is fit for purpose. You trust the source. It's part of an ecosystem or community that has collaboration and it has clear objectives. So once again, even though I'm a data person like most people on this call, I try and remind people not to get lost in data. Data should be a avenue to get what you want, and your North Star should always be your project or your objective, and data should be supporting that. You shouldn't be using data for data's sake. So in general, finding quality data and having that support your project is more important than using lower quality data just to have data there. There are lots of data standards. One we'll be talking about in a bit, but generally open data should be following some open data standard. You'll see this a lot in the public sector conversations around what are data standards, how do we create data standards that are high enough to have interoperability, but also low enough to make it accessible for everyone to use it. And then finally, be open about whatever issues you have with data. Your data may not always align. That's fine. Things don't have to be perfect. Just during your analysis or during your project, be open about that and just reference your issue in your analysis. There's lots of open data resources. The UK government alone has quite a large database. If you go to data.gov.uk, they have a lot of statistic data sets. I think almost anything around the economy, regions, councils, anything you could think of, health, all there, and all time bound. The UK data service, which is ukdataservice.ac.uk, is pretty much just a database of databases. I looked at their international data sets and there were over 30 on the first page that just connected you to every US federal government, UN, EU data sets or websites that have open data. And then I listed two others, the EU Data Portal, as well as the Open Data Institute. And we'll make sure to probably, I assume, share this presentation so you can just find the links there instead of typing out these long URLs. But the Open Data Institute uses data sets that are already certified to have some level of data quality already. Of course, the other ones listed as well will have their own data quality as well to be uploaded to those sets in the first place. So I think that's it for me. If we want, I don't know, maybe we can have, if there's any questions on open data in general first, just for a few minutes, and then we'll let Simon start. I saw there were chats. I don't know if I can open the chat and you guys can see it. I obviously do not present very often.
Oh,
Um,
it's we're just sharing links. I shared the link,
okay,
and then Simon shared the links to the presentation.
awesome. So what do you think, Tuong? Should we continue on with Simon's part, or should we stop for if there's any
Uh,
questions?
we can ask. Does anyone have any thoughts about like data, open data, or any questions or anything to share? Because I know a lot of you have worked on open data actually, and a lot of you use open data as well. If someone can share their experience for a bit, that could be really nice. Um, Thinking maybe like, I don't know, people in INI, Jacqueline maybe, or anyone who has anything, or David from the Hardship Fund.
My only thought on open data was I advocated for Ordnance Survey to make a load of open data in my master's thesis, and I assume it was completely coincidental that they then released a load of open data, but I like to think it was entirely because of me. So I would add the Ordnance Survey data portal and open data to that list of things to look at. There, the data on there is yeah, really good for the UK.
Great. We will add you as a special thanks to the presentation as well
Thank you.
for getting that data
It's
there.
the recognition that I've really been waiting for.
Amazing, David.
Yeah, can I ask
Yeah,
just a
go for
quick
it.
question? I have no idea, but when you are using external data, do you usually have a frequency to check when there's a new, I don't know, like a released data, if you are using a version like 19th? So is there a, I don't know how it works, if you have to check frequently.
I guess it would depend on how you set up, well, I guess what you're creating in the first place and then what your analysis framework looks like. For me, most stuff that I have used or created are set within a certain time frame, so I wouldn't need to check for updates. I'm going to bet, and maybe Simon would have more experience, I'm going to bet that most systems that are well known for their collaboration are going to have some sort of push-pull scenario with their APIs to let you know that there's a new version and you can import it. But I don't want to say that for sure. That's just a hunch.
Thank you.
Izzy has unmuted. I'm guessing she wants to say something. Yeah, I think, well, I'm just going to comment on that. I think, yeah, if you can use an API or even on data on GitHub or something like that, and if you can connect it automatically, hopefully it will get the updates automatically when the dataset updates. If not, then I don't think they have a, it depends on the dataset. They tend to have like a different frequency of update. Like, let's say you're connecting to the UN list of world countries or something like that. It only updates when there is a change, which doesn't happen very often. So I don't know, did you have any specific data sets in mind, for example?
Yeah, just an example, I was working with the gene with postcode data from ONS. So I have done some work around that. And then I realized there is a new one now released in May. So, okay, now I have to do again, download again, do all the process to update our server. So I don't know, like in best practices, if you have any pattern or no.
We were talking about this actually the other day with Anna Cooper, about maintaining data sets in general. It's like, in theory, we should try to automate it as much as we can. I don't know what other people think about this, but like, if it's a source that updates by itself, then it's nice to just keep it connected and automated as much as you can, so you don't have to go and check. But if not, I would set a frequency of checking, just to make sure you don't miss out on it. But if anyone has any other thoughts.
It's definitely connected to your information workflow, which, I mean, despite us talking about it all the time, does actually require you to sit down and lay out you know, I think that we always talk about that it takes effort to, you know, lay out where your information comes from and where it's going and how it's used. But at least in the past 7 years of me being an IM person, have done it less than a dozen times. And when I have, I always go, oh, I should have done this more often. And so that is a piece of looking at what your issues are, like, oh, about updating it, and then really thinking, what is my current, you know, data workflow through its analysis and publication, and is there a better way to do this, and, you know, what are the pros and cons, and how can we make things automated, which isn't actually always the best option, but definitely makes it easy as far as updates go. But yeah, it's about understanding your data source and yeah, and trying to figure out what that workflow is.
Thank you.
I guess the risk associated with not updating that data set, we might have to evaluate that as well, because like if it's a lot of effort to update, but it's not like a highly critical data set, then you might not need to update it until it's, you know, really out of date. But like if it's like a minor postcode that we never reach anyway that gets updated, maybe you don't need to download it every 5 weeks, but maybe just every 6 months. Maybe we should switch to Simon. That baby is really cute. I think you can share.
Yeah, I had to take him on. His mummy needs to do something. We're both working from home, so we're kind of swapping between who has less to do. Yeah, he'll be out of your sight. I know it's very disruptive, but yeah.
He's learning about data. It's very important.
Brilliant. I'll jump in now. So I actually don't know everyone on the call, so I'll do a quick introduction. So I work on Andrew's team, the MAP team, 1 day a week. And I also spend time working with the Humanitarian Data Exchange 1 day a week. And I'm on the working group for the Humanitarian Exchange language, which is something slightly different. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So let me just share my screen. Cool, is that coming through for everyone?
Yeah, I can see it.
Brilliant. Yeah, everyone's faces is covering the present button.
Sorry.
So, is that working?
It's loading.
It's getting there.
Slowly. Brilliant. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, I work for the Humanitarian Data Exchange 1 day a week and on the working group for the Humanitarian Exchange language. And there is a slight difference between the two, despite their acronyms being very similar. So the Humanitarian Data Exchange is an open data portal set up by UN OCHA in 2014. And it's really a place for different organizations to come together to share data about international humanitarian response. And then there is HXL, which is the open data standard, which Ryan was talking about earlier, of what many of the data sets on HDX use. And it's just a way of laying out data to make it more usable and interoperable. So actually, I picked up an old presentation here, so some of these numbers are wrong. But there is a lot of data on HDX. It's now up to over 20,000 data sets, and it's covering a huge range of sectors, basically everything you could imagine. And it's pulling data from, say, the World Food Programme about food prices, the World Bank with sort of country level indicators, to very detailed data sets from, say, Shelter Cluster about who's doing what activity in different countries. I think in total now there are 300 organizations sharing data on there. So if you haven't visited before and you're working sort of in international data, it's really worth going on there and seeing what's there related to your projects. So Hexel is the sort of other half of this, and this is a data standard to put your data in. And once you do that, it increases interoperability, and there's an ecosystem of tools which then can be used with the data. So the idea of this is supposed to be something you can learn in 30 seconds. And so you take your spreadsheet. Here we have an example one which has a cluster water and sanitation, education, health, some made up districts, coasts and mountains, and people affected. To add this standard to it, you insert a row under your headings. So the standard is based all around spreadsheets. And then you add in standardized hashtags. So instead of everyone writing their sort of own headings that varies a lot, there's about 50 agreed upon hashtags that you write as your second level headings. And that is all the standard is. Originally, it was a super complicated technical standard that not many people were using. But then they realized 80% of people work in spreadsheets in this sector. That's not going to change anytime soon. So let's make a standard that works with the spreadsheets. Here we have some of the hashtags that have been agreed upon. There's tags around places which appear a lot. So country names, longitude and latitude, administration areas. So for UK, admin 1 would be Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and England. Admin 2 would be counties, admin 3, local authorities. They have tags based around people and household. So this is what they call the onion model. So you have the overall population, you have the number of people affected within that, then the people in need, how many people are targeted by an organization, and how many reach each a subset of the last. There's tags around responses and operation. So this is around what activities, what organizations there, what sectors, tags around crisis and incidents, and then a few miscellaneous ones such as dates and descriptions. I realize as well, this is actually an old set here. There's recently been added hashtags to do with cash information management. So hash value, the amount of money transferred, and modality, the method of doing those transferring. So all it's about is taking your spreadsheet, adding that second row, and then picking which one of these tags is most appropriate for your column. And that enables a lot of sort of tools to then be able to go into your data set and can start to understand the context of that data, what's in that column, and start to use a bit of intelligent workflows around that. So here is a network analysis I did of HDX. So each of these dots represents a data set. The size of the circle represents how many times the data set's been downloaded, so how popular it is. And I linked data sets that had similar tags together. So if they were both tagged shelter, they would get a line between it. And sort of the more tags that were meta tags about the data, the stronger the connection was, and it sort of built these clusters. And then what I did was highlighted those in red were the ones that were in the Humanitarian Exchange Language Standard. And overall, it's about 40%. But what you can quickly realize from that is you see the red is all in particular clusters. So that is when an organization has adopted sharing in the open standard and sort of shared a data set for every country. So while it might seem like there is a lot of data in the standard, there's still a long way to go because the real value is in the data, not in these clusters, the sort of individual bespoke data sets. And there you can sort of only see a peppering of red in the middle. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the ecosystem of tools. And then we're going to try and do a bit of an exercise. I've only ever done this in person workshops before, so we'll try and see whether it works remotely, and I can flip to demos if it proves a bit difficult. But some of the tools in the here are picking up data in the standard. We of course have Humanitarian Data Exchange, but there's also mobile data collection, which supports the standard, Kobo and Owner probably being the two biggest there. There's tools to help you add tags to your data set. There's tools to check data quality, so a bit like a spell check for data. Tools to help you analyze, set up workflows and visualize. And all of these are at different stages of development. I'm going to be focusing on two in particular today. And this is the ones I use most commonly myself in my work. One is about setting up automatic workflows, which really touches a point earlier about making sure data sets are up to date. And there's tools around visualization as well. So this tool is the Hexel proxy. And what it does is, this is really your ETL, sort of your extract, transform, and load. So you can, any data set which is exposed to the web, or if we install Hexel proxy within the Red Cross ecosystem, it can be any of our data sets. You point it to where the file is, and it automatically loads it in, detects where the Hexel hashtags are, and then starts to provide a functionality based on those tags. It can work with some authenticated sources as well, so you can drop in your link to your Kobo survey and your API token, and then it will load it in. Within the transform, it's got data cleaning functions. So say the hashtag is hash affected, the number affected. It knows that should be a number, and then can go in and clean those numbers. It can do union and joins between different data sets that are Excel files. So on the fly, it can merge data sets, replace data, aggregate, sort of usual sort of database functionality, deduplicating, and it's got some nice functionality I'm starting to use quite a bit, which is quite often you find people share data with you, which is what I call wide form. An example may be you have the years across the top, so you have 2019, the number of people reached, in the next column 2018, and quite often you want this in the long form where you have those years in a column. It can transform sort of from that wide form to the long form on the fly, and vice versa. And then at the end, it serves the data back to you in the Hexel standard in a few formats. That can be as a CSV, comma separated value Excel file, or there's multiple JSON formats as well. But what's really interesting about this is this is all about automated workflows. And as you add your filters, and we'll do an exercise around this, it stores your process in the URL. So if you ever visit that URL again, it will go back, download the latest version of the data, apply those transformations, and then give you that data in its latest form. So say we point this at HDX, and we built visualizations for HDX like this. If the contributor updates their data, and the next time someone visits the URL to receive the data, it will check HDX for the latest data source, download those, transform those, and serve those to you in the latest form. So it's a really good way of setting up workflows that, that are automatically updating. And you can do quite complicated workflows in steps, and it's all through a graphical user interface rather than having to jump into code to code these. So hopefully, while some of it's still quite complicated, the barrier to learning is slightly lower. And the other data set tool I'm going to be talking about a bit more detail today is Hexel Dash, and this is a tool I've been developing and Ryan has helped out as well for the last few months. And this really is about creating a dashboard visualization tool orientated towards humanitarians. So it has quick mapping. If you have what we call place codes in international response, which is the agreed upon codes for places similar to what we have LA codes in the UK. If you have those in your data set, it'll automatically download the geometry, join the two files, and create maps for you. Most important, I think it has intelligent suggestions. So it looks at the tags within the data set and suggests to you the most appropriate charts, headline numbers, maps for that data set. And that's really going in there and saying, I see you have hash affected and hash country name. It really makes sense to have a map of the number of people affected by country, or a row chart showing the top 10. So it makes intelligent suggestions like that. It's print friendly. 50% of data products UNOCHA found are printed in the field. So we really wanted to make sure these dashboards could all be printed on an A4 piece of paper. We focused on low bandwidth. So generally the dashboards turn out 10% of the file size as other popular providers with the same data sets. It's free to use with no sign up required, and the code is completely open source, and it integrates with the rest of the tools in the Hexel ecosystem. Cool. So we're going to jump into what I usually do as a workshop exercise. So we're going to see how well this works. I'm going to give a quick demo of the Hexel proxy live, and then we'll have a go at doing the same with a slightly different use case, just so you get used to using it. I'm going to be using two data sets today, and these are actually derived from data from the 2014 skipping around there, 2014 Ebola crisis in West Africa. Computer's struggling, here it loads. And this data set was interestingly compiled at the Red Cross, even though remotely by volunteers at the time. So when we started being asked to support the response, there was no centralized data set of where the Ebola treatment centers were within the 3 most affected countries. And what we actually got was our volunteers to read all the newspaper sort of articles coming out, which had stories about MSF is setting up an Ebola treatment center in this town. There's been an instance of violence over here. And we actually compiled the first data set of where these Ebola treatment centers were, shared it as open data on HDX, and then it was picked up by the UN as the official data set to use about where the Ebola treatment centers were. So it's a really interesting success as a team for us being remote, but having capacity to compile this. And also open data that people weren't having to duplicate this effort to create this data set. We were able to share it on the Humanitarian Data Exchange that had only been around for about 6 months, and that it later got adopted by the UN. So this is all real data apart from the number of affected, dead, suspected and confirmed cases that is made up. But this was a data set where each line is an Ebola treatment center. We had their status, the country where it was, the admin location, in this case, I think it's districts where they are, and the particular code. And then the organization running it, and then some made up data about dead, suspected and confirmed cases. And as very common, we've got the data split into 2 files, which you often get and having to merge. So to use the Hexel proxy, and the links are in the survey I shared earlier, but you just visit the Hexel proxy page. I'm working in Google Sheets, but this works with any file that is exposed to the Hexel proxy. So that can be on Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox. So I just grab the URL of the file, I drop it in, and the Hexel proxy then loads the data, and it's ready then to do the manipulation. Can't remember what the exercise is in particular. Okay, I'm going to merge the 2 data sets together, filter by status, and give the number of, say, open Ebola treatment centers per country. So to add a new filter, I go to new filter, and in this case, I want to merge from another data set, and it's just a case of grabbing the second data set here, grabbing the URL, pasting that in, and add filter. And what the Hexel proxy here does, you might not have noticed, those 2 data sets were in a slightly different format. And this is quite a common use case. Add filter. Oh, I've done the wrong filter. I need to do append. So this is quite a common exercise where you have given 2 data sets to merge. And what the Hexel proxy does that is clever here is it looks at the placement of the Hexel hashtags and matches them for you. So say in one data set, if hash country was in column 10, and in the first data set, it was in column 2, it will find those, it will swap the order for you, and then append them for you in the correct order. So just a few clicks of the button, done that. And then say we want to filter by status. I can't remember what the status names are. Functional, let's get the number of functional per country. So status equals functional. It then filters to just the functional data sets, and then it has a filter called count rows, and this is basically like making a pivot table in Excel, and we say we want to pivot on country. It will then create that summary for us, and we can see there's 3 functional Ebola treatment centers in Guinea, 15 in Liberia, and 15 in Sierra Leone. And what is great here is those data sets can now be live. So if anyone goes in from MSS and adds a row to their data set, it will be picked up. If anyone adds some rows in the other one, these will automatically be picked up. You just need to visit this URL again. It will automatically redo that whole workflow, and you can download your data as a CSV, JSON. And what I usually do then is I feed this link into a dashboard. So when anyone visits the dashboard, it then fetches the latest data on the fly, cleans it, transform it, whatever we need to do, and feeds straight into our dashboard to have the latest data set. So in the chat, I posted earlier a link to the presentation, but it'd be great if people could have a go with just playing with the Hexel proxy, doing something similar, either the same workflow or I've added a task below. Give me a shout if you're having any problems. So yeah, that's in the Zoom chat is the link for everything you need, dataset 1, dataset 2, the Hexel proxy. Have a go at that and give me a shout if you have any problems or questions at this point.
Sorry, so it's the first link, right? Second.
The second one, the first one, it invites Ryan to edit the presentation, so the second one will be a bit cleaner. I feel like this is the point where we need background music to be playing.
Oh, it could be Jeopardy music.
Yeah, well timed.
I can't find it.
I can drop it
Could
in
you
again.
On the presentation?
Yeah, so it's in the presentation on the slide. You can
Slide 21.
see. Has everyone got that?
I think if you could repost it, that would really help, actually.
Go. Okay. Just trying to find my chat behind the shared screen.
I can do it if you want me to.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, when I saw it blinking, I was like, can I click the chat? Can I see it? Okay, so that should be it.
So I have a question, actually. Andrew's about to say something.
I was just going to say that I'm guessing some people are doing the example, but I'm guessing there are a few of the non-datary people that wouldn't even tackle it and doing there's probably got some general questions around it as well.
Yes, feel free to ask questions while
Yeah, I was gonna ask
people are having a crack.
Can you use so you said you can put a Kobo link or like more private data sets. How does that work?
Yeah, so it only works with certain authentication at the moment. I know that there are authentications that work with Kobo and HDX, and I assume other portals that are in the same format it will work with.
But
so
your data becomes public, right?
Am I still sharing screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is one I quickly tested earlier. So essentially when you drop your data in, you'll then be asked to put in your token. This is a test data set, so don't worry about this. So you drop in the URL to your survey, it will come up with this page. You put your token in, and then basically the data is then ready to shape a recipe. You're right, at this point, the data then becomes open, so anyone can access it after you've applied the recipe. So in the recipe, you want to either cut out all the sensitive data and aggregate to a level that you think is safe as well. A common paradigm I use is, so as part of the Hexel data standard, you can chain attributes. So for affected, if you add plus refugees, that refers to the number of affected refugees. What I do is I add plus sensitive to columns which I think is sensitive, and then I just say filter out any columns which have plus sensitive on. And I also, because Kobo surveys get really long, up to like 200 columns, I only really tag the columns I'm interested in for that particular dashboard. And then there's a function to say cut out all columns that don't have Hexel. So you're left with, say, the 5 or 6 you're interested in. Another thing I've been doing is then it's a really good place to add P codes. Via the proxy, you can sort of merge from another data set. So if you have place names and your P codes as a data source, which can point to from HDX again, it can automatically add those P codes so you can work with the data a lot more easily.
Right. So if I understand correctly, if you share the link, no one can kind of reverse engineer back to your sensitive data set.
No, yeah, they basically can only get to the point at the end of the recipe.
That's what I was going to ask as well, because that's a clutch point for data privacy, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm actually pushing to be able to have it then authenticated from the Hexel proxy onwards. So you can pass a token to the Hexel proxy to keep the whole sort of flow secure, but that's a way off.
That's good if you can aggregate a piece of data that's sensitive, but not like expose the sensitive data. That's very good, actually. But then, and then make the rest of the aggregated data public in an automated workflow.
Yeah, yeah. And what I really like about this as well is the whole graphical user interface, that you're not having to jump into code to sort of get this working. And again, once you put the dashboard on the end, it's auto updating. So in Mozambique, the relief unit, we're using it just to track what districts they have been to so far and how many people they've reached. So they're just using it as a monitoring dashboard. At that time, the Kobo API bit wasn't ready, so they were just cutting and pasting their bit out each day. But now that whole workflow can be automated.
Cool. Does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just hogging the question space.
I was going to ask about. Oh, sorry, Andrew. I interrupted.
Johnny, go on, David. You go.
Sorry. What's when you created a pivot table like summary? What was the filter that you used?
Really unintuitively called count rows.
Count rows. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, a few of these. There's really nice wiki sort of documentation behind it, so you can find out what stuff does. But at face value, it definitely needs a lot of UX work to make this slightly more easier to comprehend. It does have a nice feature added as a request from Johnny, actually last time we gave a demo, which is when you say add a filter, so say I'm cleaning normalize for white space and sector, you can now add this steps. Cleans the sector.
That's useful.
Column. And then, so you've got a bit of documentation with your workflow now, so people can understand what each step is doing.
It's a very good request.
Yeah, great request.
Yeah.
Just used it for the first time. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I use it all the time now. It's, yeah, incredible. I used to drop quite complicated sort of recipes to people and they'd be like, I can't work out what this is doing. So it's, yeah, a great addition. Cool.
I've got a couple of questions. One very quick one.
Go for them.
One of the sheets you shared had loads of space at the top with like an explanation and stuff. Does it automatically find where the hexel is, what row it is, and disregard everything above them?
Yes, so per the standard, the hashtags have to appear in the first 25 rows. So you can have up, say, include in the header 23 rows of notes and space and whatever you want.
Cool. And another one, so is obviously we want people to use Hexel, but I've wanted to use this before on a data set that hasn't been hexelated, if that's the right term. That's not possible, right? And like, for example, let's say I found a good open data set that hadn't been had hexel tags added and I didn't have the rights to add it to the source. Could I like import it and add hexel at this stage? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll quickly demo how that works.
I had the same problem recently, actually. Simon walked me through it very patiently.
Cool.
So the computer goes so slow when sharing screen and two monitors. Here we go. Let's just say we have sector once it's loaded. And I seem to be talking about affected a lot today. Health and 10 people. So we'll just share this publicly. Test. So when you add the dataset which doesn't have hexel tags present, it actually has a nice walkthrough for adding hexel tags to it. The big thing to note then is the workflow is slightly less stable. It's a bit more fragile. Previously, let's say the source changed a heading name, a heading column, because they've got the hexel hashtag, say again, country got moved to column 10 from column 2. The proxy would know how to pick up those tags and manipulate them, where now you're pretty much mapping a heading to a hashtag. So if they change, it breaks. But here I've added the data set I quickly created with just sector and affected, and then you can write hash sector, hash affected, and then you're straight into the recipe screen again.
Nice.
So you can add it to sets that doesn't exist, but just be aware it's a workflow that is more likely to break.
Mm-hmm. Is that new? That's cool.
No, that's been yeah. Cool. Any more questions, or shall I move on to the next bit?
Yeah, we've got 9 minutes left. And just maybe 1 minute for David at the end.
Okay, I'll go super quick on the last bit then. So the other tool I really want to demo today is the one I spend a bit of my Red Cross time working on, and this is Hexel Dash. So this was the one I was talking about earlier that does the automatic mapping and intelligence suggestions. So I'm using the Ebola dataset we were looking at earlier about Ebola treatment centers. I drop in the URL and say load data. What it then does is it processes the data, and it's come up with 15 charts that it thinks is relevant, 5 maps, no time series, there was no dates in there, so it hasn't done any of those, and 4 headline figures. So the next step is to choose a layout. The gray boxes sort of represent your layout. You can come back and change them. I'm gonna just choose the first one, choose your color, we're Red Cross, so it has to be red. And I'll move straight down to making a dashboard. So here we can see it's suggested different charts that it thinks it's sensible, number of deaths by country, by administration area run. In the large box, I'm going to add a map. So a map of dead by the administration area 1. It then downloads the geometry that matches the areas. So here we can see Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. So it automatically does that very quickly. Let's do the number of dead by country, and another chart we could choose is, say, I think there should be organizations in here somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe number of dead by center name. So there, we quickly created a dashboard. It also does a couple of clever things, such as suggesting headline figures, which will be sensible. So we can do the number of dead, number of suspected cases, number of confirmed cases. We can add a title, Ebola treatment centers, and add a quick description. Choose to add a data table, particular columns, maybe status and center name and primary organization. And you also can add filters, so you can filter your dashboard by, say, status. Click and save. We then have this as an online dashboard, which is then shareable with people. So it's all about super fast, let's create something in sort of 2 minutes to share. So it won't have all the functionality that you can see in Power BI, but it's not intended to. This is very much intended for super quick workflows aimed at humanitarian. And here we sort of have the dashboard we quickly created, and we can filter, say, to just the functional things. We've got our data table we chose, and we can go back and edit. So that's a workflow I use quite a bit. I'm going to quickly show you one I did this morning, actually, for the Cache Hub. So they sent me over a few data sets of cache data from 2017, 2018. This is across the whole IFRC movement, and it basically summarizes the amount of cache given out and the number of people reached by country and by sector. And they also gave me the data from 2018 and the data from 2019, all in different spreadsheets. And then this is the recipe I set up. So I selected my data from the 2017 data sheets. It had some from 2018. I added a complete data set from 2018, 2019. I cleaned the country names because people write country names in a different way. So I have a standard data set I go to, which is say, write Lao as Lao PDR. So just cleaning the data names to the UN standard. I have another data set, which within this workflow, I say, take the country name and add in the ISO 3 code. So that's what these do. Clean the country names with that table. I then add the ISO 3 code. I do a little bit of data cleaning because there's lots of gaps in the data. So I just write no data. So when it appears in the chart, it's not blank. It will say no data. And then remove the unused columns. I then drop this into Hexel Dash and made this dashboard. And this will be going on the Cache Hub. And making this whole automated workflow was probably about an hour's work. And the great thing about it is already they're coming back with queries about the data saying, we think the 2019 total is wrong. And I can be just like edit in the spreadsheet and it will just come through and appear on the dashboard. So it's a really quick and easy workflow to set up. Any questions around that at all?
It's really nice to see like the current use case and how the Cache Hub is using it. Any other ones you can link to? And seeing you go from a few bad spreadsheets that might need cleaning to easy viz that's always up to date as the data is great. Are there any other movement or any ones that you're easy to link to?
Yeah, so I'm using the same workflow on the Community Engagement Hub. So they compiled a list of different delegates around the world and what training they have done. And we created the exact same workflow. They've got 5 spreadsheets because it was collected for the 5 different regions, just where they crowdsourced people putting in their names and what trainings they had done. And we represent that in a dashboard now. So you can sort of filter and say who has done the 3-day training and tier 2 CEA engagement training. And it shows you a map of where those people are located. So I'll link to that afterwards. I can never remember the URL for that.
Cool, thanks.
Simon, once you've made a dashboard on Hexel Dash, is it public? Can it be password protected?
It can be password protected. So when you click save, there is an option to enter a password for viewing. Mm-hmm. The only thing to be aware of, the data is actually open on the Hexel proxy end. So while it is private, if someone did sort of reverse engineer to get the Hexel proxy link, that link is public.
Simon?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Simon? Yeah.
Yes.
Just a general question I can see that you've been using a global map of the world. How good is it to do a kind of similar map with just the UK or any individual country? Because that's the problem I get with Excel. It's very good with world maps, but if I want to do something that's just localized, it's not quite as good.
So here is the list of supported countries. And again, because we were sort of pitching for an international audience, we've listed which admin boundaries are supported and sort of the size of them so people could make choices in what they wanted to support. So I think we support about 60 countries around the world, mainly the ones where humanitarians are focused. We did actually recently add the UK, and I want to say it's local authorities, and maybe there was some resilience boundary I've added as well. But basically, if you want a boundary supported on this, just request it, and I'll get it uploaded and added. And we just need to sort of know what the codes are with the geometry name. So knowing that LA codes are for the LAs. But yeah, we're happy to expand this all the time. We recently had a request for Brazil, which Ryan really helpfully worked through. So we were supporting Brazil as well now.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Simon, how do people request boundaries?
Email me and I'll add it.
Yeah, if you have any questions about Hexel, just contact Simon directly.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to bore your ear off on this subject.
I think the coolest part was seeing the unclean data set all the way through to the dashboard, because it goes back to what we said on having an established workflow. So if you want, we have all these tools, but if you want them to be efficient, then you need to understand how you use these tools and to create an efficient workflow and information flow, or else it really
Yeah.
how many great tools you have.
Oh, I was actually really pleasantly surprised. I set aside sort of 2 to 3 hours to work on making this dashboard today because I assumed the data was going to be so poor. But it was a case of taking my 2018 workflow, adding it Pen 2019, and then everything was cleaning itself. There was no new results that threw a spanner in the works. So yeah, I was pretty happy with how quick that went today.
Cool. I think just in the interest of time, well, if anyone has any questions, could you send them either on the open channel or in the Slack, and we'll in the Teams, and we'll try to take them and respond to them. And I have a meeting that I'm already late to, but if David could let us explain what he's going to be presenting next week.
Yep, certainly. I am David. I also work in the Maps team. And next week I will be talking about Red Rose and the Hardship Fund. Yeah, I was redeployed there for a couple of months and I've just returned. So that's my aim for next week. I'll try and make it as dry as possible.
Please. Cool. Thank you everyone for joining. I'll stop the recording, and if anyone actually, I won't be able to take many IMLs going forward, just because of time and things like that. So if anyone wants to present something or to take an hour or to showcase something, please just reach out, because there will be lots of blank Fridays. And we'd appreciate to have other parts of the Red Cross presenting things as well. Cool, so reach out and say it. Thanks, bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good
Cheers,
weekend.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just one.